I still remember the first time the phone rang at midnight on Christmas. I was 17 years old, sitting on the edge of my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering why the holidays always felt so hollow in my house. My parents were downstairs, maintaining their usual cold silence punctuated by obligatory gift exchanges. I'd gone to my room early, just wanting the day to be over, when my phone lit up with an unknown number at exactly 12:01 a.m. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was fate. "Hello?" I said, my voice uncertain. There was a pause, then a warm laugh. "Hey, this is going to sound strange, but I think I have the wrong number. I was trying to call my cousin Jake." "I'm not Jake," I said, stating the obvious. "Yeah, I'm getting that now." Another laugh. His voice was deep, friendly, the kind that made you want to keep listening. "I'm Marcus, and I'm apparently terrible at saving contacts correctly. Sorry to bother you on Christmas." I should have said it was fine and hung up. That would have been normal. Instead, I found myself saying, "It's okay." Not like I was doing anything important, just another Christmas. Something in my tone must have given me away because he didn't rush to hang up. "Just another Christmas, huh? That sounds like there's a story there." And for some reason, I told him. This complete stranger on the phone. I told him about my parents' divorce that wasn't officially a divorce because they were too stubborn to admit failure. About how Christmas in my house was just another day of pretending everything was fine. About how I felt like I was suffocating in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty on the inside. He listened. Really listened. Not with the distracted half-attention people usually give, but with a presence I could feel even through the phone. When I finally stopped talking, embarrassed by how much I'd unloaded on a wrong number, he didn't make it weird. "That's heavy, man," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you're going through that. For what it's worth, I think you're brave for being honest about it. Most people just keep that stuff locked down." We talked for 2 hours that night. I learned he was 19, working construction in Portland while taking night classes. He told me about his own complicated family, about feeling caught between the person he was expected to be and the person he wanted to become. We talked about dreams and fears and all the things you're not supposed to share with strangers. When we finally hung up, I felt lighter somehow, like someone had opened a window in a room I'd been locked in for years. I didn't expect to hear from him again. It was a random moment, a beautiful accident. But exactly 1 year later, at midnight on Christmas, my phone rang. Same number. "Hey," Marcus said when I answered. "Wrong number guy here, just calling to check in on you. How was your year?" I laughed, surprised and genuinely happy. "Marcus, I can't believe you remembered." Of course I remembered. That conversation meant something to me. You were real with me when you didn't have to be. "So, how are you?" That second call lasted 3 hours. I told him about graduating high school, about the college I'd chosen partly to get away from home. He told me about a relationship that had ended badly, about questioning whether construction was really what he wanted to do with his life. We picked up like no time had passed at all. It became our tradition. Every Christmas at midnight, Marcus would call. Sometimes we'd talk for an hour, sometimes until the sun came up. Through those calls, I watched my life unfold in annual chapters. I told him about my first serious relationship and the heartbreak when it ended, about changing my major 3 times before finding my path, about the fear and exhilaration of moving to a new city for my first real job. He shared his journey too, the decision to quit construction and go back to school full-time, the struggle to come out to his family, the years of therapy learning to accept himself, the small victories and devastating setbacks that make up a life. We never exchanged photos, never connected on social media, never made plans to meet. It was like we existed in this sacred space outside of real life. where we could be completely honest because there were no stakes, no consequences, just two voices in the dark, bearing witness to each other's lives. When I was 25 and my father died suddenly, I didn't call my friends or my girlfriend. I waited until midnight on Christmas, and when Marcus called, I broke down completely. He stayed on the phone with me for 6 hours, letting me cry, letting me rage, letting me be a mess. He didn't try to fix it or make it better. He just stayed. "You're not alone," he told me as the sun came up. "I know it feels like you are, but you're not. I'm here. I'll always answer when you call." And he did. When I got promoted at 29, when I got engaged at 32, when that engagement fell apart at 34, when I changed careers at 37. Through everything, Marcus was there at midnight on Christmas, a constant in a life that kept changing. We knew things about each other that our closest friends didn't know. I knew he struggled with anxiety that sometimes kept him up for days. He knew I had a fear of abandonment that made me push people away before they could leave. I knew about the nephew he adored and the sister he'd been estranged from for years. He knew about my complicated relationship with success and my tendency to self-sabotage when things were going well. The weird thing was, we both had full lives outside these calls. I had relationships, friendships, a career I cared about. So did he. But there was something about this annual ritual, this one conversation, that felt completely separate from everything else, that became essential. It was like having a North Star, a fixed point I could orient myself by once a year. By the time I hit 40, I'd lived in 4 different cities, had 3 serious relationships, and built a career I was proud of. Marcus had gotten his degree, started his own business, reconnected with his sister, and found a peace with himself that had seemed impossible in those early calls. We'd both grown up, but we'd done it together in this strange, disconnected way. "Do you ever wonder what would happen if we met?" I asked him one year. I was 43, sitting in my apartment in Chicago, watching snow fall outside my window. He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, sometimes. But I also think there's something special about what we have. No expectations, no disappointments, just honesty." "You think meeting would ruin it?" "I think meeting would change it, and I'm not sure I want it to change. These calls, they're like this perfect thing outside of time. Does that make sense?" It did, and so we kept going, year after year. The calls became the one constant as everything else shifted and evolved. I watched friends get married, have kids, get divorced. I moved up in my career, then sideways, then up again. I fell in love twice more, and both times it didn't work out. Through it all, Marcus was there at midnight on Christmas. Last year, I turned 61. It had been a rough year. My mother had died in March, and I'd spent months sorting through a lifetime of family complications and unresolved feelings. I'd also been diagnosed with a heart condition that wasn't immediately dangerous, but was a reminder that time was finite. I'd been thinking a lot about legacy, about the mark we leave, about what really matters. When the phone rang at midnight, I answered immediately. "Hey, Marcus." "Hey, yourself. How's my favorite wrong number?" I laughed, but it came out tired. "Getting old, apparently. How are you?" "I'm good, really good, actually, but I want to hear about you. What's going on?" So I told him about my mom, about the health scare, about this strange feeling of time slipping through my fingers, about looking back at my life and wondering if I'd been brave enough, if I'd loved enough, if I'd really lived. "I keep thinking about connections," I said, "about the people who matter. And it's weird, Marcus, but you're one of the most important people in my life, and I've never even seen your face." "I know what you mean," he said quietly. "You've been my constant, too, the person I can be completely real with. Do you ever regret that we never met, that we kept this separate?" He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing, thinking. "I used to think it was better this way. safer maybe. But lately I've been wondering if I was just scared. Scared of what? Of it not living up to what we built, of losing this thing that's been so important to me, of being disappointed or disappointing you. He paused. But I'm 63 years old and I'm tired of making decisions based on fear. My heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying that I think about you every Christmas and I wonder what it would be like to have this conversation face to face. I'm saying that maybe it's time to stop wondering. We talked for hours that night, like always, but there was something different about it, an energy that felt like standing on the edge of something. When we finally hung up, he didn't say when or if we'd actually meet, just that he'd call again next year, like always. I spent the year thinking about that conversation, about courage and fear and the stories we tell ourselves about why we can't have what we want. I thought about my mother's funeral, about how many people had shown up to mourn someone they'd never really known because she'd never let them in. I didn't want that. I didn't want to get to the end and realize I'd held back from the people and experiences that mattered most. So this Christmas I did something different. Instead of waiting in my apartment for the midnight call, I went to the place I knew Marcus lived. I'd known the city for years, had pieced together enough details to find him if I wanted to. I'd just never had the courage. I stood outside a small house in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, watching the lights on a Christmas tree glow through the window. My phone said 11:58. My hands were shaking. I almost turned around a dozen times, but I stayed. At exactly midnight, I saw a movement inside. Through the window, I watched a man reach for his phone. Tall, gray hair, wearing a sweater I somehow knew would be green. My phone started ringing. I didn't answer it. Instead, I walked up to the door and knocked. The ringing stopped. There was a long pause. Then the door opened, and Marcus stood there, phone in his hand, staring at me with wide eyes. "Hi," I said, my voice shaking. I figured 44 years was long enough to wait. He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched 44 years of recognition flash across his face. He didn't ask how I found him or why I came. He just smiled, this beautiful, warm smile I'd heard in his voice 1,000 times but never seen. "You want to come in?" he asked. I was just about to make a very important phone call, but I think I can reschedule. I laughed, and it came out half-sob. "Yeah, I'd like that." We sat in his living room, and it was awkward at first, trying to reconcile the voice with the person, the idea with the reality. But then we started talking, really talking, and it felt like coming home. All those years, all those conversations, they'd built something real, and now here we were, finally in the same room, and it didn't ruin the magic. It completed it. "Why now?" he asked at one point. "After all these years, why show up now?" I thought about it, about my mother's funeral and my heart condition, and the feeling of time running out. Because I realized that the bravest thing we can do is show up for the people we love. And I love you, Marcus, not in spite of the distance or the mystery, but because of everything we've shared. You've been my witness for 44 years. I wanted to finally be in the same room as the person who's seen me most clearly. He reached out and took my hand, and it was the first time we'd ever touched. "I love you too. I think I have for a long time. I just didn't know what to call it." We talked until the sun came up, like we always did, but this time I could see his face. I could watch his expressions change. I could exist in the same physical space as the person who'd been my anchor for more than 4 decades. I don't know what happens next. Maybe this becomes something different. Maybe we figure out how to integrate this relationship into our real lives. Maybe it stays exactly what it's always been, just with occasional visits. But I know this: Showing up was worth it. Being brave was worth it. Sometimes the most important relationships in our lives don't look the way we expect them to. Sometimes they start with a wrong number and a willingness to be honest with a stranger. Sometimes they survive through nothing but consistency and care and the courage to keep showing up, even when it's just a voice on the phone. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to knock on the door and find out that the person on the other end is even better than you imagined. That 44 years of midnight conversations were just the beginning of something neither of you expected, but both of you needed. Marcus makes coffee now on Christmas mornings. We still talk at midnight, but now we do it face to face in his living room or mine. And every time I see him, I'm grateful I finally found the courage to turn a wrong number into the rightest thing in my life.